We've been spending time with the beautiful apostolic stained glass windows here at First Methodist Church in Crestview, Florida. And today, we're going to look at three. The reason we're going to do that is because, well, frankly, there's not much to say about them. We sometimes call them the minor apostles because very little is known about them. And as an evidence of the lack of information, what little we do have is often confusing. For example, let's begin with Jude, who appears to have three names. He's commonly called Jude today, but he's also almost certainly the disciple called Thaddeus. And he's also known as Judas of James, which was probably the name his father gave to him. It's important to note that Jude and Judas are the same name in Hebrew. Thus, you can easily imagine that either Jude or the early church fathers might want to use a name that is clearly different from Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. Hence the name Thaddeus. But there's another question. We know that one of Jesus' half-brothers was named Jude. So did Jesus pick one of his own brothers to be an apostle? Most people think that's unlikely. And then there's the matter of the letter of Jude in the Bible. Was this written by the apostle Jude or a different Jude? Opinions are mixed. Well, regardless of all the historical confusion, today Jude is known as the patron saint of hopeless causes. And that was originally because of his name. Those who pray to saints because they believe that these saints can help us, people years ago did not pray to Jude for fear that they might accidentally be praying to Judas Iscariot. And so, the thinking goes, you had to be pretty desperate to risk praying to St. Jude. The irony is that today, he's possibly the most popular saint among those who pray to saints. Well, it's generally thought that Jude the Apostle died in 65 AD in Syria, possibly in the same event with Simon the Zealot. Now, if Jude was not confusing enough, how about James the Less? He's called that because there are at least three Jameses in the Bible. There's the one we're calling James the Less. He's called the Less because he's less prominent than the others. And then there's the one we just call James. He was part of the inner circle of Jesus, Peter, James, and John. And then there was another half-brother of Jesus named James, though it's highly unlikely Jesus picked one of his brothers to be an apostle. Well, through today's scholarship, we generally understand all three of these Jameses to be different men. But in early church history, several church fathers treated all three of these as the same person, hence all of the confusion. But we're not finished yet, because this James, whom we call James the Less, is also identified in the Bible as James, the son of Alphaeus. But wait a minute, the apostle Matthew is also called the son of Alphaeus. So are James the Less and Matthew brothers? The most likely answer is no. It's just a coincidence that both men have a father with the same name. Because why would the gospel writers constantly remind us that James and John were brothers and that Peter and Andrew were brothers, but yet not mention that Matthew and James the Less were brothers? Well, aside from his name being in the list of the apostles, nothing else is said in the Gospels about this James the Less. Since the early church confused the three Jameses, it's hard to separate out how this James died. Some say he was beaten with a club, others stoned, or pushed off a building, or crucified. Our stained glass window contains two of these. Well, let's do one more. And yes, there's confusion about him too. His name is Philip. He was from that town on the north side of the Sea of Galilee called Bethsaida, just like Peter, James, John, and Andrew. Philip is the disciple who brought Nathanael to Jesus, and we'll talk more about Nathanael next time. Philip does have one quote attributed to him. On the night of the Last Supper, Philip asked Jesus to show them God the Father, which is a rather unusual request coming from a Jew, since they all knew that no one can see God and live. Jesus answered by showing how he came to make the Father known. Jesus said, "When you've seen me, you've seen the Father." The confusion about Philip comes because there's another Philip mentioned in the book of Acts. And some early church fathers speak of these two men as though they're the same person, but they're not. The Philip in Acts was not an apostle. He was among the very first helpers of the apostles, called deacons. Well, the apostle Philip is thought to have been killed for his faith, either by beheading, stoning, or by crucifixion. In the end, we know very little about these three men who were apostles. So, do you think they were great in the kingdom of God? I can tell you, most people would almost instinctively say no. They would say, how can someone be considered great if you know virtually nothing about them? Oh, but there's a big spiritual difference between famous and great. And I found that many people wrongly combine the two ideas. Clearly, these men were not famous at all compared to the other apostles. But Jesus told us about greatness. He said, if you want to be great in the kingdom of God, then become a servant to others. So friends, I assure you, it's possible to be great in the kingdom of God and for your name to be completely forgotten to history. Forgotten to history, but not to Jesus, the one who says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." This is Pastor Ronnie Bearden. See you next time inside the stained glass.